The Zoom is active and all that?
Do you want it to record, Justin?
You guys can, yeah, you can do whatever you want. I'm recording here.
All right, well, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order then. So the first item is approval of the minutes from December 18th, 2023, quite a while ago.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from December 18th, 2023.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second and a vote,
Also public comment.
or public comment, sorry. All right, no public comment, so we'll go ahead.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
And then just state your name.
Jean Lynch. I was wondering if it's possible for staff or someone to give us a little update on the construction on Greenwood. Right now, I can't get in my driveway.
Yeah.
So we're, the item we're on right now is approval of the minutes from December 18th. So this
Oh,
comment
I'm
would probably be more
sorry.
appropriate for the next
the next
agenda
one.
Well,
item.
let me
For
know
item
when I
two.
can talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second, and no public comment related to item 1. Go ahead and have a vote on that.
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So that is all of us in favor and no one recusing and no nays. Item number 2, public input. The public is invited to present petitions, make announcements, or provide other information to the Planning Commission that is relevant to the scope of the authority of the City of Blue Lake that is not on the agenda. The Planning Commission may provide up to 15 minutes for this public input session. To assure that each individual presentation is heard, the Planning Commission may uniformly impose time limitations of 3 minutes to each individual presentation. The public will be given the opportunity to address items that are on the agenda at the time the Planning Commission takes up each specific agenda item. So, are there any public comments?
Just a comment on the construction on Greenwood. My husband is disabled. I took him to town for a doctor's appointment, came back, and I couldn't really get into my driveway. I had construction going. I've got my car parked in the back alley, and in the future, I would think that, that is a process for the city, I believe, to notify residents in construction areas of some sort of idea of parking in their driveways. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zwatsky?
And then you do have one on Zoom.
Yeah, then I think
after
we've got an internet one.
Ken Swatsky, I don't believe the 2 topics I will speak on are on the agenda. We have an outstanding housing ordinance, and sometime I think maybe it would be appropriate to agendize an update on that because it's very relevant to what you're doing. And we'll talk a little bit later about a general plan update, so I won't go down that path. But the other one is the quote-unquote Danco or Budawatt project that we have down there. It's been repeatedly said that it was going to be coming to you, possibly this meeting, so maybe the next meeting. And I would think that the public would like to understand the status of that, since it's been an ongoing thing where it's going to be happening. You guys were off for 2 or 3 meetings there, which I can understand. Doesn't seem to be any reason to have been there because you only have one actual item to act on. Totally support you not having meetings when there's nothing to act on, but I do also support the communication we'll have today regarding the general plan update. So thank you for my opportunity to speak on those 2 planning issues. So having served in your chair many years ago, where I got educated by Bob Brown and everybody on this, and having spent quite a bit of time in the supervisor's chambers going through the whole general plan update process with the county, I do have a little bit of knowledge as far as being in your position. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
We've got one comment on Zoom.
All right, I think we have a comment on Zoom. I can't see that far, so.
Yeah, it's Julie. I'll jump in if you guys can hear me okay tonight.
Yep, we can hear you, Julie.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yay. Thank you, everybody, for getting the Zoom working. I can hear you guys amazingly, too. So this is a great milestone for us, people for Zoom. I'm gonna jump in, we only are blessed with Zoom on your planning commission. I've missed you guys last 3 months, but like Kent said, not much to act on. We've been putting the same stuff in the burner, just waiting for it to come out. And I would like to recommend, you guys maybe reviewing when Justin gets the upload up for the last economic development meeting. We had a presentation from staff on the master plan for the Powers Creek district. That was also available at the Arts and Heritage meeting. I was able to attend both of those in person, which is really special for me. We also, another community member, Andrew Jones, shared a presentation that perhaps staff can forward to the rest of the commission. I think this is all great, just catch-up material kind of for what's coming down, and maybe questions, thoughts, and reflections that our commission might have on all these proposed projects as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. All right, any other public comment? All right, seeing no more public comment, we'll go ahead and close that item and move to number 3, the approval of the agenda. Do I need to read the agenda? Nope, okay. So do I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
My motion.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, a second. And let's go ahead and call public comment on approval of the agenda. Thank you, Mandy. All right, no public comment, so can we have a vote on approval of the agenda? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those against? Okay, everyone's in favor, no against, and no one recuses themselves, so the motion passes. Okay. All right, so item number 4, application number 025-101-023/2016, review of parcel map for Casey and Stacy Eliason for minor subdivision of parcel 025-101-023 to create 3 new lots. And we go to public comment, correct?
Usually
you
we
wanna-
receive a staff presentation
Okay.
and then open it up for public comment.
Okay, so
So
do we
I'll
have,
go ahead and give that. So yeah, this item is on the agenda tonight for Casey and Stacia Eliason. They are nearing the end of their subdivision process, and they need to have their parcel map reviewed and approved so that they can have it recorded by June 10th. So this was originally approved by the Planning Commission back in 2019 on June 10th. And they have requested up to 5 years of extensions as they're allowed under the Subdivision Map Act and per the city's subdivision code. So they're nearing the end of that. So, we have it on the meeting tonight for review by the Planning Commission, and then it will go to the City Council, I believe, next Tuesday. The council will also be accepting one dedication for an easement along the driveway as part of the Blue Lake Truck Route project. I think they need a little section for some ADA improvements on the driveway. So that's generally kind of the process. As far as the Planning Commission's role, really you're reviewing this parcel map for consistency with the tentative parcel map that was approved in 2019. There's definitely been a few changes made. The applicant brought in an architect after receiving approval who kind of shifted some things around. And they've also backed away from having some of these reciprocal easements that you may see on the tentative parcel map, where there would have been shared access and parking between parcels 1 through 3, which would be accessed from Greenwood Road. They're really seeing these properties being developed with like a single-family residence and maybe an ADU, and so the idea of sharing access and parking doesn't really make sense because it's easy enough just to have a driveway and their own off-street parking. So those are some of the changes there, as well as that dedication I mentioned was not previously anticipated when the tentative parcel map was approved. It's actually something that came about when they were working on the truck route project and realized they were going to need that dedication from the property owner. So that's just a quick summary of some of the changes. You will also see that the open space area that was on the tentative parcel map, which is only on parcel 3, has a different configuration. It's actually a little slightly larger. And that open space area is needed in the case that they want to do multifamily development. They were looking at doing 2 duplexes or a total of 4 units on that parcel 3. Also, the easement area for the stormwater detention basin is slightly different. They had their engineer came up with a different design than what was originally proposed. So just a quick summary there of some of the changes that have occurred. Tentative parcel maps are called tentative for a reason. You can make changes, and we believe that these changes fit within what's typically allowed. So the city engineer and our senior surveyor has reviewed this map and found it to be acceptable and in compliance with the Subdivision Map Act and the city's subdivision code. So we are recommending that the commission approve the parcel map. And attached to the staff report for your review is the 2 pages of the parcel map they're proposing to record, and then also the resolution number 6/2019 that was approved by the Planning Commission when they first approved the tentative parcel map. And that contains a whole long list of conditions of approval that some of which needed to be addressed on the parcel map, some of which will need to be addressed as things move forward and they do development on the site. So that's all the information that staff has for the commission. And that concludes our staff report, and we encourage you to open the item for public comment.
Okay, we can go ahead and open the item for public comment. Mr. Vosky?
So maybe I missed it, but we have both what is to be the final map and the tentative parcel map side by side where we could compare. If not, if they're great, I didn't have time to go through the pack, it'll be quite
We
quick.
do, yes.
Fantastic, because that's always something so we can see the changes. So what, if I'm understanding what you're saying, is at one point the property was to have a higher density potentially, they still could do that? Or has that been eliminated? You said they're going to single-family homes with an ADU. And at one time, I thought they actually had the ability to go to a higher density than that on that. So that's why the parking's changing. So they no longer will have the ability to go to the higher density. That's a question. And the other thing is, I did want to reflect upon that. Being a developer, sometimes you have to decide what the market is. And this is an indication possibly that the market is not there for higher density residential in Blue Lake, but people still would like the rural atmosphere with a single family house. So I have no problem with the project. I'm property rights owner. Whatever they want to do that falls within the guidelines, I strongly support. Just wanted to make that notation. Some areas they're actually forcing people to have higher density in their property than they would want to have. And I will never stand behind that just to satisfy certain requirements of the state. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Any other public comment? So we can go ahead and open it up for questions from commissioners.
Could I jump in real quick?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
you're
Julie.
okay. I will never be rude and interrupt. I just wanted to, my curiosity was if the applicants were present tonight and if they were going to be kind of talking about any thoughts or concerns they had with the process, if they're happy with everything and they're really confident with the Planning Commission's decision tonight. Just curious how the applicants are sitting. And another thought for staff is screen sharing the presentations. We got to see that on April 17th on our other stuff, so that would be great. Thank you.
I'll be honest, I didn't catch all of that.
The last part was about screen sharing. I think she was thinking maybe there was a PowerPoint presentation that she wasn't able to see.
Okay.
So maybe we can comment on that, just to let her know if there wasn't one. Can we comment on that to let her know that there was not a physical presentation, just an oral presentation?
Sure, yeah. So Gary gave, Gary gave a oral presentation only and not any type of digital presentation to share. Anything else, Julie?
No, great, you guys, carry on, thank you so much.
Okay. So any questions or comments from commissioners?
No, I remember going over this one, funny enough.
Yeah, this is quite a while ago.
One of the earlier ones. So what was the exact number that they went down from the original again?
Yeah, good question.
It's
So,
12, wasn't it?
well,
Three,
let's,
four
yeah, let me
plexes?
think it through, because
Because
it's
I
been a
remember
while. But
I raised the issue, I think, with the square footage, because there was there's two different properties. One has much higher density than the other, and they were using the aggregate of the two to say, oh, this is what the density is.
Well, what they originally proposed was a total of 14 units. And so the three parcels 1 through 3, east of the wetland and access from Greenwood Road, were each going to have a fourplex. And then that parcel on the west side of the wetland along South Railroad was
That's
going
the
to
other
have a
two.
primary and a
Yeah.
secondary unit. And really, what I think it came down to is there was a lot of concern from the neighborhood, the school, and others about that amount of traffic going out that narrow road. The road, I think it's maybe 24 feet wide or something like that, and there was just concern that maybe that was too high of a density for this particular property with all its environmental constraints and limited access and things of that nature. So there was enough of that concern expressed that I believe the applicants backed away from the fourplexes on parcels 1 and 2 and said, you know what, we're just going to do a primary and a secondary unit on parcels 1 and 2, and we still want to reserve the right to do the fourplex in the middle. So I think it really was due to public opposition to that amount of density on that particular property.
Okay, is this a good time to let everyone know that I share a property boundary with this applicant? Only about 27 feet between parcels 3 and 4 mainly in the wetland mitigation area. So I'm thinking I need to recuse myself, but it depends on if we have quorum. So just wanted
Yeah.
to make that publicly.
And I also share property lines down the south side and the west side. That's my house at the end there.
Right.
Yeah, well, with real necessity, don't you pick the one that's least impacted or farthest away? Okay. So if we had 2 commissioners that couldn't vote on this, then we wouldn't have a quorum. And they do have a regulation called kind of rule of necessity, where in essence you pick the commissioners the farthest away or the least impacted so that you do have a quorum. And in this case, it sounds like Commissioner Hogan is probably the least impacted or farther away from the development, whereas,
Yeah.
your property resides right on that entrance access to Greenwood Road. So it makes sense for you to recuse yourself and for Commissioner Hogan to participate in the decision.
Okay.
Great.
Mr. Sawatsky had hinted at what I would consider a red line drawing. Having the 2 parcel maps next to each other. And I only see the one here. I mean, I know we saw the original one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have the ability, it's so long ago, it's hard to fully comprehend
Yeah.
the difference.
Right. So, within the resolution attachment 2 to the staff report is the tentative parcel map that was approved by the Planning Commission.
Okay.
And then, of course, you have as attachment 1, the current parcel map that's proposed for recording. And I did my best to summarize the differences. I think that was mostly what you'd see. There's a few other easements that were just shifted around, but it really has no, significant impact on what was originally proposed.
Okay, sorry, I missed that.
And I just had a clarifying question. that we are just concerned right now with the differences in the two parcel maps, is that correct? All of the terms
Yeah.
of the resolution have already been passed and are finalized, is that accurate?
Yeah. Now, there are conditions in there that, in essence, are functionally removed because they're no longer proposing those things. They didn't have to propose those things. We included them as conditions so that they would stick to those, but they've now said, you know what, that's not how these properties are going to be developed, so there's no reason to fulfill a condition about a reciprocal easement for access and parking, and we were fine with that. That was really based on their original design. Otherwise, all the other conditions up to this point that they need to meet, they have met. And there would be other conditions they need to meet. There's conditions and mitigation measures that need to be implemented during construction. There's things that need to be done before they sell properties, like developing a maintenance association, recording a notice of development plan, which shows all encumbrances on the property, and any future owner would know exactly how it could be developed. So it will be ongoing as far as ensuring that these conditions of approval are followed.
Okay, I don't have any further questions.
Any other questions? All right, so then, do I have a motion for item number 4, application 025-101-023/2016?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the application.
Okay, and a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Hearing nothing?
And one recused.
One
recusal,
recused, yep.
yeah.
So, the motion passes, item 4 passes. All right, so that brings us to, item 5, discussion item, City of Blue Lake General Plan, presentation from staff on the Blue Lake General Plan. Go ahead, Gary.
All right, just give me a second to finish my notes here. There's 3 of us taking minutes here. This is awesome. All right. Let me get queued up here with the presentation. Before I begin, we did receive some public comment from Mr. Sawatsky, who's in attendance tonight, and I would like to pass that out. It's a list of questions that he was asking of staff. And at the end of my presentation, I'll provide brief responses to these. There's more of these if anybody's interested.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Susan. I have to do that.
I think I need to take this. Last time I hold it, 'cause otherwise you guys couldn't hear me.
It's the best way to do it. I have an idea to fix that, but we haven't implemented on the new system yet. But I have a
Like a
headset-
little lapel-
I have a
oh.
little Bluetooth headset you can put on your ear, but I haven't hooked that into the.
Or like the little lapel thing, maybe?
No, it's just like a cell phone headset.
Oh, I've never been a fan of this.
Well, be better than holding my phone.
I don't know. There you go. And if I could have access to pressing the button too.
Can Zoom see it? Are we screen sharing?
I believe so.
I don't think you have to share it because it's being host computer or?
I don't know.
All right,
Hopefully they can
everyone
see
see
it.
that okay?
Justin, is it coming up on the Zoom?
Yes, I have it.
Oh, that's
So
right.
if you're recording, here we'll have it.
Okay.
Okay, great. Cool. So we put this on the agenda tonight because there's been a lot of interest in the Blue Lake General Plan recently regarding the rebranding, a new vision for the Powers Creek District in response to some of the applications that have been proposed recently, including the Bottawat Community Project. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to give a brief overview of the city's general plan for both the benefit of the commission and the public. So I did a little, one-page kind of staff report just outlining what I intended to discuss. Hopefully this isn't too long or it doesn't get too much into the weeds. We can always do follow-up presentations if there's interest in certain subjects. But what we intend to cover is, what is a general plan, just very briefly. I think a lot of us generally know what it is. Required elements of a general plan, what the contents of the Blue Lake General Plan are, results of general plan implementation since the 1980s, and then also the amendments to the general plan that have occurred since the 1980s. So starting out with what is a general plan? So I don't know how many folks are familiar, but the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, or OPR, is the state's comprehensive planning agency and provides all sorts of guidance to local jurisdictions about planning law and planning related issues. And OPR defines a general plan as the city's blueprint for meeting the community's long-term vision for the future. I think most of us understand that concept of a general plan. Also establishing a consistent citywide vision and direction for existing and future development. And then reflecting community priorities, values, and including supporting goals, policies, and implementation measures to achieve the community's vision. So that's generally how they define a general plan. Now the required general plan elements, there are 8 required elements. You have land use, of course, which is the most important in regards to what uses can occur in the community. Circulation, which addresses, your road systems as well as infrastructure, services, utilities, things like that. Housing, which we've become very familiar with in recent years because we have to update our housing element. Conservation, open space, noise, safety, and then more recently you have an environmental justice requirement. Now that really is only applicable to communities that are defined as an economically disadvantaged community. According to the state mapping that we obtained, they show the Blue Lake Rancheria as being an EDC. But of course the city of Blue Lake's not, and that's tribal trust land, so of course the city's not going to be doing a general plan element to discuss what happens on tribal trust land. It's a sovereign nation. But if Blue Lake was defined as being an economically disadvantaged community, that would be another element they would need to do. So the contents of the Blue Lake General Plan has most of what's required by the state. The land use element was amended in 2021 and includes the open space and conservation elements. So that's permissible by state law to have the requirements for elements be addressed in another element. And it makes sense for the land use element because what land uses are allowed in the community directly affects what happens with open space and conservation. The circulation element was last amended in 1986, the last time the city of Blue Lake put a lot of effort into doing their general plan. And as I noted, that addresses mostly the road system and Blue Lake circulation element. Things like services and infrastructure, facilities like that are actually also addressed in the land use element. For Blue Lake, the land use element is pretty comprehensive. Not all communities do it that way, but there's nothing prohibiting that. The housing element, now this one really needs to be updated on a certain cycle. We have our housing element planning cycles that the state requires, and by law you have to update it in this area every 8 years, and we're currently in the midst of doing an update, which will be brought to you in the next few months to go through the adoption process. Then going back to the 70s, Blue Lake has its safety element. I think they call it a public safety element, its noise element. The safety element really addresses natural hazards and man-made hazards. So, you know, in this community, flooding, you know, we're protected by a levee, we have seismic activity. It also goes into traffic hazards and things like that, so more man-made hazards. The noise element, which is pretty good for its time and still pretty relevant, deals with the highway. Obviously, the noise contours has mapping of that and how that affects the community. Talks about industrial development, noise impacts from that. At this time, there was a train. It's no longer going through town anymore, but that was also a subject in the noise element. And then Blue Lake chose to do optional elements. These subjects matter to the community at different times in its history. The scenic highway element from 1975, Blue Lake chose to do that. It was really focused on views from the highway, not having billboards, and encouraging the county or the state to designate 299 and possibly other local roads with high scenic value. It didn't necessarily have a lot of teeth in it. It was just kind of aspirational, if you will. The downtown element that the city created really focuses on the downtown and economic development down there. Talks about mixed uses down there, residential being subordinate to commercial, there being a cohesive appearance in the downtown, the upkeep of infrastructure and you know, private structures and things like that. Generally just promoting policies for a nice downtown, really, is what that one's about. So just to show you what these documents look like, so this is the elements they created in the 1970s, and as you can see from these timelines, Blue Lake's actually never done a comprehensive general plan update. It just did elements as needed over time, and that's what we're still doing today. So they started with these ones: public safety, noise, scenic highway. Oscar Larson Associates was the city engineer at the time. I'm not sure who environmental research consultants are, but they did these together. And they're pretty decent for what they are in their time. They did good research, and a lot of this stuff is still applicable today. Not a lot has changed in the community in regards to these issues. This was the bigger effort that was done in the 80s. You know, as I noted, land use includes open space and recreation element requirements. But, you know, this was like 10 years later that they came and did these other elements. So together, the two of them have meet the requirements for, you know, the different elements that a general plan needs to have. And Blue Lake developed these incrementally over time. So this gives a little bit of information in this slide about general plan build out. And that's really what you think about when you do a general plan. What is the build out we're projecting? What level of development can happen under the general plan designations and the zoning? So the land use element in the mid-'80s considered what available vacant land that the city had. And these bullet points down here kind of summarize where they went with things. You can see right here, so this is from 1988. This is right after they went through this effort. But you've got all this vacant land here, and that's really where the city was looking to see its residential development. There's still other vacant lots and underutilized lots through the city, but those were the biggest parcels at the time. And something they did was they created a planned development residential zone, which was like this super cool planning tool back in the 70s and 80s, where you were clustering development. You were protecting open space and wetlands and drainages and things like that, and allowing higher densities on the parts of the site that could actually be developed without you know, impacting wetlands or having to mitigate for things. So that was the big thing they were doing on the western side of the city at that time, and they were projecting most of their residential development potential could go there. Obviously, you have the plan for the industrial park. That used to be a mill site. You can see, you know, how much of it was open back then in 1988. That eventually some of it filled in over time. There's still some vacant land there. But the plan was to replace the jobs from, you know, the old mill, and to bring in needed revenue for the city. It was supposed to be the economic engine that was going to help Blue Lake survive long term financially. And then you had the plan for the downtown. And really what they did down there is they had a retail commercial core, and then they applied the retail commercial zone to really residential properties, hoping they would convert to commercial over time. And as I'll note later, that didn't happen. A lot of these things didn't happen, and that's one of the main takeaways of this presentation. But at that time, well, you can just see leading up to this effort, from the 1940s on, population went up a bit, it went down, it went back up. So it was, about 1,200 something people in the mid 80s when they went through this last planning effort. One important point about doing what Blue Lake did is they also did a general plan EIR in the mid 80s. And the purpose of doing that is it's a programmatic level. It's not a project specific level. And really you're analyzing the projected build out under the general plan, the maximum development scenario, worst case, development that could happen in the community is what you're analyzing. And inherently that is a cumulative impact analysis because again, you're considering all of that at once. Under all these rules and all this zoning and all these standards that we applied, what could potentially happen from an environmental perspective? And that's the purpose and goal of a general plan EIR. So we'll go through a series of maps here, just so you guys can see what they had. This was the general plan land use designation map from the 1980s, mid 80s. And you can kind of see this MD is medium density residential. Anywhere you see that, they're saying single family. The LD is low density residential. Those are lots that are supposed to be 10,000 square feet or larger. You can see your commercial designation around the downtown, your industrial here with the industrial park. You can even see that they were throwing out some of these designations for potential annexation in the future, thinking about what land use designations they would apply if the city were to annex these areas in its sphere of influence. So along Blue Lake Boulevard, gas station, makes sense to be commercial. Along here, more single family. This property right here, which is just over Blue Lake Boulevard, and I believe the only property in the city that's north of Blue Lake Boulevard, they were looking at commercial. These areas here, which I don't think goes over to Christie property, would be south of the highway. They're looking at low density. Down here, the Marais property is ag. So they were thinking forward at that time of, well, what if we did potential annexation in the future? We actually ended up doing an annexation study in the early 2000s that kind of built off of this. So what I think is really important to look at is that Blue Lake did a general plan incrementally over the years, starting in the 70s and then finishing it off basically in the mid 80s. And over time, it hasn't, the build out that was projected in the general plan didn't really happen. So, as you can see on some of these points here, the industrial park didn't provide the revenue needed or that the city had projected that it would. The downtown lost businesses and some of these properties converted to residential. The population decreased, not increased, which the city had projected it would. Blue Lake in some respects has transitioned to a bedroom community. Mandy loves that term. And really in some ways, Blue Lake is in kind of a precarious financial position. And that was not the goal of the general plan to be where we are today. And it's one of the reasons we've gone through some of the more recent planning efforts, and it's one of the reasons we did the various amendments over time to kind of change course to hopefully bring in economic development and revenue to the city that it needs. So I just here want to note some of the amendments in the 1980s. It's important to understand that the city has incrementally amended its general plan because there's been changing community sentiment. There's also been some robust community visioning efforts in the 90s and in the 2000s. And some of these changes to the general plan came out of those efforts and that changing community sentiment. That's often why small cities will make changes to their general plan. So starting with in the mid-2000s, I actually worked on this one, the mixed use designation and zone. Basically, we created a new general plan designation for mixed use. The city didn't have that before. We also created a corresponding zone and applied it to the residential properties surrounding the downtown commercial core. Those were properties that had been zoned retail commercial with the hope they would convert to commercial, and very few did. So at that point, we'd heard enough from the property owners in the community going, why are you saddling us with the retail commercial zone? Nothing's happening. Okay, fine, let's apply a mixed use designation and zone that lets the market dictate. If more residential makes sense, great. If you can actually make commercial viable, that's great too, but you have a choice. And a lot of things are principally permitted there and subject to performance standards, so not as many CUPs needed to do, smaller residential or commercial development in that area. So that was a good one where the city was transitioning towards a mixed-use development pattern surrounding its downtown. And then in 2009 to 2011, especially based on some of the recent visioning efforts, the community wanted to get away from industrial development. There had been impacts for years from Blue Lake Power, Calgon Carbon, and other industry down there. And so changes were made to the industrial and light industry zones in the business park. They wanted to transition the concept to a business park and less industrial. And the changes made to the code were to allow retail sales of things produced in the park and in general. And that's really what allowed the tap room to happen. You know, that wouldn't have been allowed in the zoning prior to this time. And that development was really kind of a cornerstone of showing the community what that district could be down there. It's been wildly popular, as many of us know. So then after Mandy came on in 2015, 2016? Okay. She undertook a visioning effort to look at rebranding the business park. That wasn't necessarily bringing the revenue the city needed either. I mean, sure, we're getting revenue from the tap room and, you know, sales tax, but it really wasn't that much. And the city needed to do more. So, you know, we did the visioning efforts. People were favorable to mixed-use development down there, certainly didn't want to see more industrial. And as many of us know, we applied the mixed-use designation down there and created a new zone called the Opportunity Zone, which corresponds to the mixed-use designation. That's where the consistency was. And applied that to many of the properties down there. The power plant site didn't get it. Gary Johnson's gravel site didn't get it, but pretty much every other site did. And that was a 4-year effort with a lot of input from the community. So other than that, of course, the housing element updates. We have to do that. You know, that's required every 8 years. And generally, there's not a requirement in law to update these other elements. It's typically done on an as-needed basis. You know, there's a general guide that maybe every 20 to 30 years you should do a comprehensive general plan update. But that doesn't apply across the board. That's as needed. Small cities like this honestly don't have the resources or the need to be doing comprehensive general plan updates on par with Eureka and Arcata and Humboldt County. Not enough has changed. Most of the general plan is still relevant, and the city's done what it needs to incrementally to achieve compliance with state housing law and to change the general plan in the code because of the visioning input and the change in sentiment in the community. So that's really what we've done over time. Other than the transition from industrial park to business park, I've been engaged in most of these efforts since 2000, working with the city over the years. So just to give you a little more context on the mixed-use designation zone to show you what happened, this is what the map that was actually approved by the Planning Commission at that time. And you see here you still have your retail commercial core in red, and then surrounding that is where we added the mixed-use zone. And then this map here is a map that really shows the general plan designations in the whole community. This was developed by our prior firm in 2010, and again it shows, you know, your mixed use around here, and that really still most of the community is designated for medium density or single family residential development. This map may look familiar. This is when we did the Powers Creek District redesignation rezoning, so I described it earlier, but this is what it looked like. You still ended up with, you know, this area of Gary Johnson's property. You know, the power plant site is staying in the industrial designation because, one, he can, you know, plans to continue the industrial use down there, and the power plant was still there at the time and trying to still be viable, so we left that alone. Otherwise, everything else got an MU designation, and a corresponding opportunity zone was ultimately applied to be consistent with that MU designation. Another more minor change but necessary change was the creek and the levee were part of the industrial and light industry zones. Nobody had ever taken the time to carve those out and say those shouldn't be zoned that way. So we dealt with that through that process as well. So this is the open space designation there, which is more consistent with what occurs there. You know, you've got a riparian corridor and you've got a levee protecting the community from flooding. So that takes us to where are we now? As we described, and as many of us know, we've got this new vision for the Powers Creek District. We're transitioning away from industrial development, very little property in the city has an industrial designation or zoning anymore. There's a focus on mixed use and recreation, which is what came out of decades of community visioning. You know, let's have mixed use in the community. Let's bring in sales tax. Let's have more housing, especially affordable housing, and recreational opportunities, especially in proximity to the river. Also, subdivision of the Powers Creek District to prepare sites for development. That's something the city is currently looking at, has some Economic Development Administration funds to do a minor subdivision down there to create lots that would be appropriate for future development. We have some reasonably foreseeable projects down there where folks have submitted applications or entered into exclusive negotiating agreements with the city. Ottawa Community submitted an application. The Rousseaus submitted an application. The Courtyard is being looked at. And then there's a parcel north of Paradise Cay that's also being looked at. Those are the 4 projects that we analyzed in the cumulative traffic study that was done in the last couple of years. Of course, the housing element update for the 6th cycle. We have a completed draft that HCD has signed off on, but they've told us we won't certify it until, 1, you adopt it and do CEQA, but also that you implement one of the implementation measures, which is Implementation Measure 14. It relates to that combining zone that needs to be applied to a site that is 1 acre or larger to allow multifamily development by right. So that's something we'll also be working on this summer as well with the Commission and Council. So just looking at potential population growth for build out under the general plan, I would argue that it was similar back in the 80s. If all the land in the community was developed at the max development potential, you would have added maybe 600-700 more people. Population was 1,200 something. You would have got upwards of 2,000. We're looking at the same thing now. In other words, what I'm saying is not a lot has changed, and the general plan build out that was projected, we still fall within with the amendments that have been made over time. Nothing has been done so drastic that we have to go do a whole comprehensive general plan update to rethink the whole thing. I mean, we've made some course corrections over time is really what has happened to try and bring in economic development, more housing, recreation, things of that nature. So this slide is about something we're proposing to do to the general plan. I've got a copy of the various general plan documents, but you know, it's an assortment of documents. They were typed out in the 70s and 80s. We've scanned them in, but they're not super accessible to the public or staff for that matter, to be honest. So we're proposing to modernize it, as I would call it, to make the general plan easy to review by the public and staff. Essentially take those scanned in versions, use text recognition software, get it into Microsoft Word, so that we can essentially create individual PDFs of each element. These will be uploaded to the city's website. Someone will be able to click on it. Right now we have the housing element up there. We have the land use element, the 2 that were most recently amended. We would have all of them. And they'd be much easier to review in that condition. That's something we've asked Mandy to put into the budget for the next fiscal year. So, end on this slide. Obviously, I think you should open up for public comment. I just find these pictures interesting. 1953, a lot of development in Blue Lake. There was no general plan. Most of this, a lot of this community was already developed before the city ever even engaged in any general planning. So you had a mill site, you had your downtown mostly built out, you had a lot of the older, historic homes. This is a neat old picture of what the downtown looked like overhead at that time. So anyway, besides that, as I noted, there was some public comments. It was received, which I handed out, and I'd like to go through those items, just give brief responses. I'm not going to get too deep into it. So this is from Mr. Kent Swatsky, addressed to me. He has some questions regarding the presentation, generally regarding general plan updates. So the first 2 are really related and asking essentially what my experience is in doing this type of work. The first question is, what is your personal experience conducting one, meaning a general plan update? How many have you been primary staff on? So my response to that is, our firm, we're a team. It's not just me. We all work together on it. But we've helped a lot of Northern California jurisdictions do long-range planning tasks, and we continue to do so to this day. We've done a number of general plan amendments and a lot of zoning code amendments. So these type of incremental amendments that we've done with the city of Blue Lake are right up our alley and something we generally do. It's a basic requirement of being a planner, is to be able to do this type of thing. The next question is, what is your estimate of cost to do a full GP update for Blue Lake? We have not attempted to develop a cost estimate like that. The city has not asked us to do so. But my understanding of seeing RFPs and the things that were awarded to firms that do this type of work, I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars to into the millions, hundreds of thousands of dollars really on the cheap side. These can be very expensive. There's been folks that have referenced the process by Humboldt County or the city of Arcata. Arcata absolutely spent well over $1 million working on the Gateway Plan, holding all those meetings. That's not something Blue Lake's ever had the means to do, and I wouldn't recommend that they do. It's unnecessary for a community of this size. You can tailor your general plan efforts to what your needs are. Not everybody has to do a robust effort like that, and it's just not encouraged. Next question is, outside firms specialize in GP updates. Which ones do you recommend? I don't particularly recommend any. That's not really my job. The city should put out an RFP, and they'll solicit bids from qualified professionals that do this work. Some of the big ones, in the state, PlaceWorks has helped a ton of these communities up here do housing elements and comprehensive general plan updates. Minter Harnish is another one. There's firms that specialize in this. If the city ever wanted to do this or could afford to do it, yeah, put out an RFP and hire one of these firms. Obviously, we're a consultant to the city, and we would help in our capacity as city planner, reviewing things, peer review, that kind of thing. But this isn't something, we're necessarily recommending that the city does. The next one is, my understanding is that it is recommended that GPs are updated every 20 years. Is that true? I believe I already addressed that. If appropriate. If you're a community that is developing rapidly and you just, in the last 20 years, had your full general plan build out or close to, then yeah, you should probably be doing another comprehensive general plan update process. That's why you see Eureka and Arcata and some of these other communities do those kind of things, because it's necessary and appropriate for the situation they're in. Again, Blue Lake has declined over the years. The general plan build out nowhere near happened. They've lost population, businesses, etc. So doing a comprehensive general plan update doesn't really make sense for Blue Lake. Incremental adjustments that can hopefully get the city where it needs to be financially, that's what makes sense. Next is it true that the housing element, the GP, and any amendments to it must be consistent? Of course, that's basic planning law. You have to have internal consistency within the document and external consistency between the general plan and the implementing zoning code. And we always strive for that anytime we work on amendments. And then lastly, is it true that if they're not, projects approved may be subject to litigation? And then it says maybe one for the city attorney. Yeah, that is a legal question. As you guys may know, seeing development happen over the years, projects can be subject to litigation for a lot of reasons. It's usually done by folks that oppose particular developments, and it's not usually general plan consistency they're worried about. They usually go after CEQA because it can be vulnerable in that way. So anyway, that concludes staff's presentation. I encourage you to open the item up for public comment.
Thanks, Gary. Public comment? Mr. Swatsky?
For starters, I'd like to thank Gary for addressing the questions in the public forum. The problem that I'm 70 years old, most of my life I've been involved in property development. And when I come to an area to look at potentially developing in an area, wherever they are, I go to the general plan, of course, first thing. And if I go there and I see a map in there in the general plan, look up the general plan, and it shows the currently O-zone as still being industrial, then we have a problem. That's not a consistency factor. We have those things. The whole plan needs to be so that you can drop into any part and you're not getting things that are contradictory to each other. So that's a general concept. The current, here's my building. There's the current thing in the general plan. It sounds like we're possibly going to have a 40 or 50% increase in population. That is a major change in any area. I don't think you're going to see it in a general plan update having not been done by Eureka. If they're going to have a 40 or 50% potential increase in population. And so it is the time, if we're considering going down that route, to redo the general plan. Possibly there's grants out there. Possibly it could be done without a total redo. But I highly recommend that the city get a hold of some of those companies that specialize in updating general plans and have them review the information that was presented here, take a quick look and see some information from them, do an RFP, see what they would say they would have to do, and then we will all know, because these are experts in the field. Now, I did work with, was it Sunrise or Sunshine Planning? Bob Brown had many years ago, worked with him. He was the city planner at the time when I was on there. And like he says, they do a lot of these kind of ancillary uses, but as far as the general plan itself, the county made a very big mistake. They tried to do it in-house. Took them 12 years. By the time they were done, it was no longer, in my opinion, was no longer current. I sat through many, many meetings, probably 50, 60 meetings at least, going through all the process and dealing with all these different things and the back and forth. So it is an important thing. It's important for you folks to have the confidence that you can go into this plan. Great to get it into one binder, great to get it all segmented, but I believe after, it's not 40 years, it's a couple of years shy from that, it is time to do a comprehensive update on the thing. Even for a small community, you'll find that the smaller communities do it at least that regularly. So again, you can check around, ask other communities how often Trinidad or Rio Del or Ferndale maybe redo theirs, and maybe I'll do a PRA request with them so I can bring back some information as far as how often they do theirs. Thank you for the opportunity to have a little input at this time. Oh, I did have a question for you folks. It was mentioned that there was a great deal of input regarding the ozone. Of course, you are some of the most savvy people here. I didn't know whether you were involved in that process or not. Just some of you probably were, maybe some of you weren't.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Is there anything online?
Me again.
Go ahead, Julie.
Okay, thank you. Since 2021, when COVID started, we had a lot of virtual meetings. They're all broadcasted on Access Humboldt. It generated a lot of public actually being involved during those meetings. And a lot of community members were coming and going and have asked for a general plan review, mainly for the consistency and the purposes of the housing element and ozone. In my opinion, this presentation is not what the public's been asking for. It's kind of like another sales pitch that we got at Town Hall, which we were supported by our planning commission to have that town hall. At the town hall, we were asking about a general plan update, and we were basically told that it would cost us $1 million, and it kind of was swept under the rug. I've kind of held the torch, and many others in our community. We've been avidly commenting for years at council where this agenda item was originally focused, and I've just been trying to educate, like Kent was saying, how the process has been for Eureka, Arcata, our county. They have all avidly from years been doing their general plan updates, and that's to get out of litigation with their consistency. This last week, our planning commission for the county had a great review of the Browns Act. It's on Access Humboldt, but within all that, they went into good detail on the general plan and their responsibility to maintain its consistency. So I think that's a great resource, so check that out. It should have been in the packet and it was available on the city webpage. I could add more a little bit, but I asked the commission to continue this discussion due to just the fact that I don't really feel like this is what the public originally had. Maybe consider making, sorry guys, I'm doing tours with critters, but a recommendation back to the council, kind of what you heard tonight and received, and maybe this presentation can go to our council. Maybe that could be your recommendation for the evening. And I'm really concerned, though, that there were certain sales pitch on specific property owners that were kind of out of context and not necessarily necessary. And I just don't like seeing that kind of stuff happening. It's been happening for years, and I think our commission should be aware of that and be conscious of it, too. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Any other public comment? Go ahead.
To be honest, I'm still trying to figure out this general plan. And if there is no actual general plan, and it's just sort of little piecemeals of things being done, there is no plan. I mean, that's sort of my interpretation of what's going on. And I tend to overthink things. But One thing that struck me in Gary's talk was about circulation and safety. It seems to me that in the development of Blue Lake, it wasn't well thought through as far as circulation and safety. We have a one road going out, and it's going to be highly impacted by the industrial park. And for me, being able to look at that, and at this point, I'm not seeing a whole lot of change that can be done. You've got a truck route, you're going to have bike riders, you're going to have walkers, you're going to have all of this. And as far as a circulation route that has not been done, I think that becomes a safety issue. I'd like to see both of these looked at. Just on a personal level, I lived in a place that's called Berry Creek. Berry Creek was burned out a few years ago. The whole community was burned out. There was one road to get out. People were driving through fire. If you look through at Paradise, California, it was one road. People were driving through fires and dumping their cars. If you look at Hawaii had a fire. The people were trying to get to the ocean. It was just awful. So I'd like to see that with circulation and safety combined, done not by people that are trying to develop and make money, but by people that are in charge, which is this commission, on the safety and the safe development of Blue Lake. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Go ahead.
Elise Scafani, Blue Lake. So I have lots of questions, and I know this isn't the forum for a question answer, so I don't know if there might be an opportunity for some other type of forum to happen. Something that Jean just said really struck a chord with me, and that's kind of the motivation factor for making partial changes that affect the general plan, the various elements. And it seems to me that that all of those changes were made with a specific goal in mind. And there's times where I question that goal and the motivation for that goal, and if that is really truly in the best interest of the town as a whole moving forward. And so I think when I hear people asking about the general plan and requesting a general plan update, I feel like that's kind of where they're coming from. We've done the piecemeal thing, and maybe we're legal by doing the piecemeal thing, but is that really the best way to look at this? And if it is, then maybe there's a different way that we can communicate that in the, with the community, and we can all sit down and have these discussions in a forum where people can get answers, and we're not restricted so much by protocol. Even in the town hall meetings, I know a lot of people went to those, but weren't always happy with the outcome because it seemed really scripted and really limited. And so just one of my goals in general is to have the community feel that they are involved, feel that they have avenues for involvement, are getting real answers, and not being shut down all the time. And so that's part of my, how I'm looking at this, and I'm just hopeful that we can get some recommendations out of this meeting tonight. More education for the public and also for the council as to what all this means a little bit deeper than, well, we did what we had to do legally. It still seems fragmented to me. I know there's all the parts and pieces, and the housing element is huge, and the work that's been done on that is huge, but is it really taking us in the direction that we want to go? And is that direction a reflection of the whole community. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, with no further public comment, we'll go ahead and close that and open the item for discussion with planners. Questions?
Yeah, I had, I guess, kind of one just general overarching question. Because largely to me, it seems like the ad hoc adjustments that have been done in the past, that we're looking at continuing to do, answers the questions that need to be answered in the moment. But I do also see the same problem that the community feels like there's elements not being addressed, which brings me to the question, how hard is it to add additional elements as they did in the past? Maybe there's something that the public wants to see put into that's not already in, right? Like another element specifically. How hard would that to be added and specifically have public input for? Maybe something that addresses, whatever missing element there is that, we're not seeing here.
Yeah, I mean, just to answer the beginning of it, I mean, the city does generally meet the requirements for the elements that need to be in a general plan.
Yeah.
If there's specific issues that the council, commission, community, et cetera, would like to see addressed in those existing elements, we can do that. Does that require a full comprehensive general plan update? No, it does not.
Yeah.
You can make those changes. So wildfire was brought up. I don't know how adequately that's addressed in the safety element. That's a potential issue that could be addressed better, things like that. I will note that in, I think it was 2012, the city got a strategic growth council grant. Were you on the commission at that time? No, okay. Bob might have been, Bob Chapman, but anyway, so we got money to update the land use element, the circulation element, the housing element, and create an energy element. And those drafts, some of them still exist. Obviously for the circulation element, we've already redone the housing, we've already redone land use, but let's just say that circulation element, we had updated maps, all sorts of things. At the end of that grant cycle, we presented the deliverables to the city council, and they said, look, we don't have the money to move forward on any of this stuff. I think we made some small code changes, but there are other efforts that the city was able to find funding that could be done to do some targeted updates to the general plan. But again, I don't believe, in my professional opinion, all the work I've done for all the communities over the years, that this community needs to do a robust general plan update process. I really don't believe that that's necessary, and I don't think that would be a good use of the city's limited resources. But if there's specific issues that the community wants to see addressed in updates, targeted updates to these existing elements, then by all means, that should be presented to the council, and that work could be done if the council is able to find the money to do so.
Any other questions? The one thing I had that I think is interesting is I think that it appears that part of the problem is since it was done in pieces and some of it's, dated while it still might be fine, maybe it would be worth a little bit of effort to link those efforts to show how they carry into the future. So when you look at some of the older updates, to kind of just provide a pathway on how how it's applying now. Or how that zoning has changed and how it still fits in to that core issue, essentially providing a roadmap for the public to better understand why, or a better evaluation of why a comprehensive update isn't necessary. So, cliff notes for lack of a better term, right? To kind of just link those different elements, since we're talking a pretty large span of time, and I could see it being somewhat convoluted, trying to go through those different elements and understand where they sit in the present now with some of the rezoning and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
No, that definitely makes sense. And I think one of the Cliff Notes versions that we've said repeatedly is the change down in the Powers Creek district. That was very clear through the various visioning efforts that the community wanted to see industrial development limited. So that's one of the bigger changes that occurred. that I think was good for the community, you know. I mean, those businesses caused impacts over the years. They couldn't survive in the current business market. They ended up closing down, and the city has an opportunity to put in mixed use down there under the current general plan and zoning that would be less impactful to this community than what was previously there. So that's a big one that I think came out of the visioning for the Powers Creek District that I think is fairly easy for folks to understand. Some of those other changes, obviously, we can put other material together for the council or the commission to explain why some of those were made. But overall, I mean, like I said, I still consider those changes that have been made to be within that general plan build-out. Mr. Sawatsky had noted 40 to 50% increase in population. That was already part of the general plan build-out from the 80s. That has not changed today. You know?
Yeah, and I think that making those linkages is important because that's the way I understand it too, is even though it was done those number of years ago, it never really happened, right? So we're still in that mode, and I think that just gets missed a lot. And that's the same thing that we see with the traffic and the safety element. I mean, a lot of that planning was done for way more traffic than we see now.
That's a good point.
And people, I think, just forget, or, those documents are disjointed. So, again, just to reemphasize, maybe just creating those numbers to kind of better solidify where we're at.
Yeah. And I think once it's in a state that is easier to review, I think people will understand better what the city's general plan is. But sure, I mean, it's a hodgepodge of documents right now. There's no denying that. There was also a note about, the general plan map still showing it as industrial. Well, I mean, what was approved by, the city council clearly shows what was approved, but yes, it needs to be updated in the general plan documents. So one of the tasks that we're doing that Mandy has, approved to work on is updating the general plan map and the zoning map, and that's what would go into this modernized land use element, if you will, so that we have a current map in there. Some of the other things is at like the town hall meeting, folks are like, that's an old flood map or that's an old this. That's easy enough to get those layers and create a GIS map that shows what the current FEMA mapping is for the community. So that's like low-hanging fruit. They could really kind of modernize and make this a more usable document for people to understand. But there's a lot of good stuff in there. I mean, the community put a lot of effort into creating that general plan in the 70s and 80s, and it's pretty good for a community of this size. But yeah, there may be some adjustments that could be made, and that should be a recommendation to the council if there's specific issues that the commissioner public would like to see addressed.
I agree. Having stuff updated to a digital environment, which we all work in now, and having current maps and all that. I mean, people are just visual. That's the first thing they're going to look at. And if you get confused there, it's hard to follow everything else along, because then you're just kind of searching through documents, Yeah. So
I think it's also important to keep it in the context of Blue Lake and the footprint and what we're actually really looking at. I mean, the majority of Blue Lake is really built out. We're not talking about annex properties that we're talking, like Arcata's looking at the Gateway. That's a huge addition to Arcata. We're not that community. When you look at what's really available for the city to develop and concentrate on, it's really the Powers Creek District at this point is kind of the focus. And what's being looked at and planned now is less dense than what had been planned for over the years. So we're not, when you just kind of look at the footprint of Blue Lake and what those impacts are, it's just a very small segment of the community that really has much development potential. We have the potential for infill development that's been analyzed to our housing element, but when you're talking about any type of large-scale development or impact, it's really the Powers Creek District that is the main focus. And you look at what's being proposed with all the recreation space, the changeover, so we don't have 100-foot, smokestacks and, lots of truck traffic, transitioning those uses over to lower density uses, is really kind of the focus. So it's when you read the general plan, there's so much value in it. The community vision is still there. And I think the kind of the hopes and dreams and visions are still reflected in it as well. And that's reflected, I believe, in what we're moving forward today.
Yeah, and, you know, we've pointed back to the community visioning efforts. There was a robust one done in 1997. There was some done in the 2000s. I mean, that's where the city went back to gauge what the public sentiment was and what they wanted to see done in the community. And we've attempted to implement that with these various amendments to the general plan. So I don't want to discount the amount of effort that went into collecting that input from the community and how many of those ideas are currently being implemented or were implemented since the 1980s. And that was part of what I was trying to cover in the presentation.
Thank you. Any other questions or
No, I thought-
recommendations?
No, I just thought it was a great presentation and really helped me understand why some of the assumptions from the original general plan are still relevant, like due to our population, for example, that hasn't really changed since the 80s. So I think that's helpful. And it also made me think of the circulation element, and when we were reviewing the traffic study on Greenwood, how, you know, the assumptions were for truck traffic and actually for a lot higher volume. That road was designed for a lot higher volume traffic than we're currently seeing, because again, as Mandy mentioned, we're switching to lower impact, lower density uses that have less impact. So I think overall that's a good change for us, and yeah, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, I liked the presentation as well. I was curious that, you know, when some of these other versions were done, the people who did them aren't the same people who live here now necessarily. So even though maybe our community population hasn't changed, the people who represent that population have changed to some degree. I don't know if that's how true that is or isn't, but I mean, I feel like since I've lived here, it's been, you know, I could name a lot of people that live here now that didn't live here when I moved here. I've only been here for, you know, 13 or 14 years. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm just curious, like, you know, those previous versions, you know, is that still reflective of what this current community looks like? That's probably hard to answer, but.
Well, not too hard to answer. I mean, the biggest changes that have been made in the last 5 years have really been that opportunity zone and its application to the Powers Creek district, and then our housing element update, and you know, all of that's happened within the last few years, and there was a lot of public engagement, you know, during those times. So I feel like those being kind of the biggest changes the community is looking at right now. Yeah, it is more recent. And so folks that live within the community for the last 5 to 10 years, you know, had the opportunity to participate in those processes. Whether they did or not, it's a different story. But
All right, anything else? All right, well, I guess we can go ahead and close that item.
Oh, I just have one more question, actually. Are you planning on presenting a similar presentation to City Council? I know it's more under the purview of the Planning Commission, but I do think it might be good for educational purposes. I don't feel like everyone necessarily on council has a great understanding, and these
Sure.
things do come to them.
yeah, Mandy had discussed that. I kind of viewed this as a test run, if you will. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay.
Is that your understanding?
Do you want to make a recommendation as such?
Sure. I could recommend that this presentation or something similar also be done at City Council to educate the public again and council members.
Yeah, it's something that's been brought up at council meetings, the same thing, you know, kind of a lot of, you know, commentary about, you know, the need to update, and I think there is a disconnect about the actual, you know, what a general plan actually is, and is it still reflective in what everyone's roles are in that. So I think it would be good for Gary to continue to move that through the process.
Yeah, to be honest, what I had told Manny is I was hoping we would be able to do that kind of modernization and then give the presentation
sure.
like
Right.
in sync.
Right.
But, you know, they need to wait till the next fiscal year to actually have budget for that. So,
Sure.
yeah, we potentially could give it to the council soon or wait until, you know, we've been able to assemble the general plan in a way that's much easier to use and understand.
Great. And this wasn't an action item anyway, so.
It's not, but I appreciate the
Yeah,
recommendation.
that's my recommendation for what it counts for.
And so, I guess, sorry, that brings up another question. So just to be clear, the item regarding making it digital, and more available, that's kind of that will be done. It's not like a thought, but it's, you're working on it. Okay.
Yeah, we've given a scope and estimate to the city,
Okay.
but, you know, they need to put it in next fiscal year's budget,
Right.
because there's not currently budget to do that, so.
Yeah, and unfortunately, these are old documents, so there's no digital, so everything has to be scanned and then translated to a PDF and then gone through. And
Yep.
you know how that is, where it's like changes.
OCR doesn't always work very
Yeah.
well.
These are
Exactly.
old copies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, our scope estimate reflects that.
Just give it to ChatGPT, it'll be fine.
Just update the forms. Get a general plan in 10 minutes.
Right, there you go.
Probably 20 seconds.
All right, so if there's nothing further on that, we'll go ahead and close that and move on to miscellaneous planner items.
Since it was brought up, do you want me to just give an update on Bottle Up?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So, folks had brought up the status of the Bottawa Community Project. I don't know if folks are familiar, but they hired a different architect to work with them. So they're currently working with Garrett McSorley, who I don't know if you're familiar with. He was a protege of Cash Bouget and now has his own firm. So they brought him on, and this site has also been moved to the east to an area up against Fish Brothers and Tomaso's that's kind of better suited for the development that they're considering. So they're still in the stages of trying to prepare a site plan for this new site with this new architect. Once they do, then, you know, we would be providing that to the folks that prepared technical studies so they can update those studies based on the new location and the new study areas and things like that. And then we'd be sending it out for referral, doing AB 52, you know, going through the process essentially, but we need that updated application from the applicant before we can move forward. So that's the stage they're at right now.
So that sort of hit a restart,
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the subject area is pretty limited.
Right.
It's like right next door.
Yeah, the bike park ended up being a little bigger than anticipated, and so that caused the project to have to move over.
Is that finished yet?
No, it's
Yeah.
in
The bike park?
under
Yeah.
construction.
Also, well, I'm saying the determination for what exactly it's gonna be. I remember last time we saw a preliminary on it, there was
Yeah.
like we really haven't seen anything since then, so I'm just wondering if something was finalized that's,
The
you
bike
see it's
park?
like, yeah,
Oh, no, it's just under construction. We're,
Oh.
we just wrapped up for the winter and then we're just starting to get back, pulling the tarps off the piles and seeing what material we have. And in fact, that was the meeting we had, before this, was a meeting with RCMPA representatives and state collective, people and, just getting ready to kick that back off, so.
Do you have anything else, Gary, for miscellaneous items?
Not at this time.
All right, so moving on to item 7, we have upcoming planning commission meetings for the next 3 months will be June 17th, July 15th, and August 19th. I guess it'd be a good time to ask commissioners if there's any known conflicts yet. I know that I will likely not be here on the 19th.
I won't be here on the 17th.
Okay, let's make some notes of that. And for you, June, okay.
Court, you were gone on which one?
August.
August.
And who was gone on the 17th?
Cool.
Unless we can meet by Zoom.
And I think you can listen in, but
Yep.
participate.
I may be able to do it remote. I can, if you just keep bugging me, I'll let you know, but I'll probably be in Alaska.
Yeah, we don't really
Cool.
have the capability anymore to do the remote stuff,
Okay.
so it gets a little complicated.
Okay. And as usual, I mean, my schedule changes all the time, so I'll just try to remember to keep everyone updated.
Gary, do you think we'll have items, like we'll meet potentially for some of these meetings? Or is it hard to say?
So upcoming items will be the housing element update,
Okay.
but we need to circulate the CEQA document. So that pushes it out about a month. Other than that, it would probably be good to bring the combining zone implementation measure 14 for the housing element to you guys for discussion. So we can continue work on that and then eventually bring it back for action. So yeah, I would anticipate we will have at least something on there in regards most likely to the housing element update.
Okay.
All right, well, I think that concludes us. Do I have
Motion to adjourn?
a motion to adjourn? That was fast.
Yeah.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, no nays. Motion passes.